Hello, this is Anna Amelia from Northeast Animal Rights. We have Stuart Mitchell, who's known as Vigilante Vegan on social media, joining us from New York City today as part of our Saturday Spotlight interview. So welcome, Stuart, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you and your listeners.
You're very welcome, very welcome. So first of all, we'll just go straight into the questions if that's okay. Can you tell us about your vegan journey and how did your upbringing contribute to where you are now?
Well, my vegan journey started in the food industry. I started to question where we had access to so many different foods, like especially when it came to meat products, chicken, poultry. And because in my mind, I'm thinking that a farm is a place where a dozen or so animals are just milling around, minding their business until the inevitable happens. I had no idea that these places called factory farms exist. So when I started to do my research, I realized that farms are not as caring and loving as I thought they were. They're actually jam-packed with thousands of animals, chickens, cows, and they're being mass produced and forcibly fed and impregnated for the sole purpose of killing them for consumption, for human consumption. And once I came to that realization, it kind of like pushed me forward to stop contributing to it, but not also to stop contributing, but to also do something about it. And that kind of pushed me into the world of activism.
Yeah. So what do your family and friends think of what you're doing?
They respect it. They're not vegan for the most part. Well, my kids are vegan, but the rest of my family, not so much. I think they respect what I'm doing. They definitely notice what I'm doing and take consideration to the things that I bring up, but they haven't made the change yet. It's hard, but I realize that when you're vegan, it's always hard with your friends and family. Like you have more influence on people outside of that little world of yours, but it's always hard to convince other people, like especially your family members, because they know you for so long and maybe they just look at it as just a change in who you are. And so it's very difficult to convince friends and family. Well, from my experience.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, when we talk in our group, we say that, it's much more simplistic to convince, to have the conversations with friends rather than, like particularly friends who are not necessarily lifelong friends. But family is much more difficult, and it's possibly what you've said, the fact that they've known you all this time and then they've seen a change and they don't understand why you've made that change and they haven't. But we all have our similar sort of problems with our families. We're finding the hardest to talk to, and it's in my case, they know what I do, but I just don't talk to them about it because it's absolutely pointless. So I feel as if I affect more people by talking outside of my family. So how old are your kids then?
They recently had birthdays. My daughter recently turned 17. My son is 11.
Yeah, that's a really good age, isn't it? It's a good age to, particularly sort of being vegan as well. It's a really, really good age to kind of like to go out there and, I feel as if like the younger generation sort of, I mean, I know you're much younger than I am, but kind of like the children sort of like going out there being vegan is really, really the way we're going to make some massive progress. So we talked at the beginning about, about how to introduce you as Stuart Mitchell or Vigilante Vegan. So why did you pick Vigilante Vegan as your handle on social media?
Vigilante Vegan came from my love for Batman, of all things. Batman was known as the vigilante early in the comics, and he was a hero. He wasn't a part of law enforcement. He was a vigilante, and he believed in serving justice on his own, the way he saw it to be. So I'm always a big fan of Batman, so that's where the vigilante came from.
Yeah, so kind of, I suppose, not necessarily in line with the laws of the time, but just kind of like your own sort of like perception of justice as it is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because what we do is pretty unorthodox. It's not looked at as something that should be given a lot of attention. What I'm talking about is animal rights activism, because most people contribute to animal cruelty on some level or another. So when you have a group of people like myself and others who advocate for animals, you're sort of looked at as like a vigilante because you're fighting for something that people don't see any reward in, or don't see any what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they just don't see the value in it.
Yeah.
Like, why are you fighting for? But they don't realize that animals are the most vulnerable of all species, especially at the hands of human beings. And they need our, oh wow, I'm losing my train of thought here. They need our advocacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where Vigilante came from,
Yeah.
and the fact that I'm a huge Batman fan.
So do you get, you talked about animals being the most vulnerable, so do you get people accusing you of only caring about animals and not caring about human suffering as well?
I have.
Yeah.
I have. It doesn't bother me as much as it did early on, especially being a person of color, because most people of color, we have our own plight, we have our own oppression to worry about, and most people are focused on their own oppression, that they don't have time to focus on someone else's. But I don't see a problem with concerning myself with 2 or 3 different issues, you know? So at first it was kind of it bothersome that people felt this way, like, oh, you only care about animals, you don't care about humans. But I actually do care about humans. Humans are animals. And I do care about the plight of human beings as well. And I want people to understand that these forms of oppression are somewhat intertwined at some point, and they do meet at an intersection, and we have to address all of them, not at the same time, but we have to address them because they all are worthy of the same attention.
Yeah. So when did you start to write and perform poetry, and what point did you see you could use this poetry as a form of activism?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. What point in your life did you start to write and perform poetry, and at what point did you see it as a useful tool for advocacy for animals?
I've been writing poetry my whole life, but I recently started to perform poetry with Voice for Change. I haven't done it before that. Voice for Change for me was a challenge because I wanted to see if I could face my fears and perform publicly, but not only perform publicly, but perform with an actual message to teach people and to give them some understanding of what happens to animals and how they contribute, how they could switch over to more plant-based alternatives and ethical alternatives. So this is pretty new for me. Voice for Change will be a year old in December. We started back in 2020. So this is all still new to me. I'm still learning. I'm making mistakes, but I'm also building the courage to continue on with that type of advocacy. Whether it works or not, time will tell. It's a different form of advocacy. It's something people never seen before. So it's, sky's the limit. Will it work? Hopefully. That's the goal. That's the mission, to teach people through performing arts. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Our group organises a festival in the area. It's called Tyneside Vegan and Music Festival. And we have, rather than just have a straightforward vegan festival, we have musicians and poets that perform in there. So we have 2 poets, Kevin and Bevan, and they are, sounds like a double act, Kevin and Bevan, but they're not, they're separate. But they do slam poetry, so they're really, really it's really powerful stuff, quite emotive stuff that they do, and they're very, very good at it. They haven't performed it before, but they will be performing at our festival for the very first time. But they obviously sort of listen to what you do as well, and sort of watch what else goes on in terms of poetry as activism. So we know obviously that we're talking about poetry and performing arts as well, and different forms of activism work for different people in different ways. So have you got any stories about people who've gone vegan because of they've seen your work, or they've heard your work, or they've seen your activism in action, and contacted you afterwards? Have you got any success stories, anything you know about?
Well, people reach out to every once in a while, not that often, but it does happen where I'll get a DM on my Instagram page, or people tell me when they see me in person that they went vegan because they heard me talk about certain issues, and I make about certain things, and it feels good. I don't take a head count of how many people I turned vegan. Who knows? But I've had those conversations, and it makes me feel good to know that people are actually listening to what I'm saying, and that it's changing their lives, and in turn changing the lives of the animals that would potentially become their dinner or their fabric or their entertainment. So it feels good to know that I'm reaching people and that they're listening. So hopefully with everything else that I'm doing, somebody's listening and somebody's picking up on this information and it's changing their life.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. I mean, you said you don't know, you don't keep a head count of how many people actually turn vegan because of your work, but we know that even if one person, people tell us one person can't make a difference, but we know that one person can, because they're changing the life of hundreds of animals even in the first year. So obviously it's worth doing it. So even if, if one person watching this video decides to look into it a little bit further, it's still worth it for the animals, isn't it? So what's New York City like for veganism and animal rights, and how do they perceive animal rights? I know that obviously I've seen there's some quite big, some high profile stuff that you're involved with at the moment in terms of the horse carriages, and also the chickens with the Jewish festival recently as well.
You mean Kaporos?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. New York for veganism, like if you're a vegan, this is the place to be, especially Brooklyn and Manhattan. Within the 5 boroughs, there's plenty of vegan restaurants. There's plenty of vegan outreach. There's plenty of ways to get involved, plenty of ways. And like you said, there are different campaigns that we're targeting. And amongst those, the 2 major right now are the fur industry and the horse carriage industry. But you brought up Kaporos, and that's an annual festival. It's centered in Jewish communities where they use chickens to wash away their sins, so to speak. And we have Jewish activists that have been working for years to try to get their community to use bags of money instead of using live animals, because these animals, their ultimate fate is they end up dead and just discarded. And we've had a very successful rescue this year. Over 500 chickens were rescued from Kaporos. I mean, it's a small percentage compared to how many are sent to slaughter every year, but that's 500 chickens that get to live out their life on factory farms, happy and well cared for. And that's really the goal and the mission. Our goal and the mission is not to bash anyone for their religious beliefs or to condemn them. Our mission is to offer comfort to these animals and to rescue as many as possible so that they do live out their life peacefully. The other 2 main issues here, amongst so many in New York, I mean, these are the top 2, but that's not to say that all the other issues aren't as important. But the fur industry and the horse carriage industry, and I'm a board member with Voters for Animal Rights. And those are the 2 main topics, because for years, activists have been trying to get these horses off the streets of New York. I mean, these animals are subjected to all of the elements, the hot weather in the summer, the humidity. They are subjected to the freezing temperatures in the winter. They're subjected to loud noises, cars, fumes, like all different types of things that make these animals miserable. They're suffering, and not only that, but they end up sometimes colliding with cars. And we seen that 2 weeks ago with Chief the horse, who accidentally collided with a vehicle and caused him injuries. We've seen deaths. Some of these animals die on the street while working. We've seen a multitude of injuries, and I don't know what it's going to take for New York City Council or the mayor to understand how important it is to get these animals off the street. But as long as they're out there, we're going to be out there fighting for them. Hopefully this industry comes to an end soon, and that the workers can switch over to electric carriages instead of using live animals. So that's one of the main issues. Another one is the fur industry. We all know how heinous fur is, how inhumane it is, that these animals live in poor, cramped conditions. They psychologically, they snap, they go crazy, and then they're subjected to electrocution and being skinned alive just so people can have a fabric, a garment. So we're pushing hard on those two bills. We spoke to a lot of people that were running for city council, and they seem to be on board with banning these industries. So hopefully we'll see something really good come out of 2022 and 2023 moving forward.
Yeah, with the Capros, the chickens, we interviewed Laura Balsam, who is the director of the Jewish Vegan Society in London, and she says exactly the same thing. She is working with people to try and get them to use. Obviously, this is orthodox Judaism rather than mainstream, and to try to get them to use some other sort of form of sacrifice for the atonement. You know, like you said, money. Yes. She's a really, really good advocate down in London. And the horse and carriages, I mean, I'm presuming that they're mainly used by the tourist industry, aren't they? I mean, it's not a commuting anything. It's just actually the tourists and people who want to kind of make a big sort of like big dramatic, effort to kind of use horse and carriages. It just seems a little bit bizarre.
Yeah, it's definitely a tourist attraction. People come to New York from all over the world, and this is one of the things they want to indulge in. And for them, it's an experience.
Yeah,
they come to New York and they want to take the horse carriage ride through Central Park without really considering what the animals are going through. I mean, and these people in the industry, you know, they'll have you believe that these animals are well taken care of and that they're happy, when it's obvious. Have you ever been to the hack line? You can see the pain and suffering on these animals' faces. They don't want to be there. Like, no animal wants to have a harness strapped to their body, carrying thousands of pounds of a carriage and human beings. It goes against everything horses were born to do. They were born to run free. They were born to be majestic. And now they are put in a position where they have to wait and until somebody pays to get in this carriage and pull them through the park. It's sad to watch, and again, it's harmful to the animals because of everything that they're exposed to. It just goes against everything that's in their nature, and we're working hard to try to end this cruelty. But it's been a couple of years, and hopefully, like I said, next year we will see something happen when we pass legislation in this industry's practices.
Yeah. So suppose in the meantime, us as a tourist, we need to make sure that we're using companies who don't support this, who don't offer trips, or don't offer sort of events, anything to do with the horses and carriages, because obviously we're contributing it. But even if we don't sort of like take a ride ourselves, we still need to be making sure that these companies are not allowing it, they're not supporting it, and they're not promoting these events. You talked about the fur trade. Now, the fur trade is a little bit different in the UK because we've banned fur farms, but we haven't banned the import of fur. So obviously we don't have, the big farms, the awful things sort of like going on in our own country, but we do allow it to go on in other countries, which is just slightly bizarre. It's just kind of passing the problem to another area. And there's a lot of stuff going through Parliament at the moment where we're sort of like working on banning fur imports. So obviously that'll totally close the market because we have these awful brands like Canada Goose over here. Canada Goose obviously have stopped now using the fur trims, but they still have the down in the inside in the linings. So it's just trying to make people aware because fur pretty much died in the UK in the 70s. And because of Canada Goose, they brought it back, which is just awful. So we did loads of protests outside of the shops which sell Canada Goose, and it's been kind of like a hard, it's been like a hard sort of upward battle with Canada Goose. But they have now obviously agreed to stop it. But we need to close the loop here in the UK to stop the fur coming into the country as well. Because it's awful. It's absolutely pointless. We're not living in the Arctic. We're living in the UK. We don't need fur at all, and it's just an awful thing to have in the country.
It definitely is, and I mean, at this point, I don't understand how people don't see that. I mean, there really is no need for it. There are ethical alternatives out there that people can switch over to, and I mean, if you like the look of fur, there's faux fur. There's companies that offer something more sustainable, that's just as fashionable, that doesn't cause harm to the animals, and it doesn't cause harm to the environment. But it just, I guess with some people, it's something about the allure of wearing an animal skin. And because we live in this, well, I know here in New York in the United States, well, I can speak for myself. Growing up, if you had a fake leather coat, like you got made fun of because it was fake. It was man-made. It was plastic, whatever it was. It looked like real leather, but it was fake. And that's the culture. That's what people grow up believing, that your status is somehow solidified by authenticity, by having real animal skin. And not that we bear witness to the fact that an animal is being harmed for their skin to make these products. It's just that's what it is. It's the authenticity, the fact that you have something that's real instead of something that is man-made. And I think the same thing applies to fur. I think people that wear real fur don't want to wear something that they might consider fake. But I mean, there are celebrities that are pushing towards sustainable fashion, which is great. But for the majority of people, like, there's just something about wearing an animal skin that says that you have a status. It's luxury. Hopefully that'll all change. And I understand that, you know, these are all baby steps. Everything takes time. Like you guys over there in the UK are ahead of the curve. Like, you're doing great things that we're trying to accomplish here, but it's all baby steps. It takes time. And you mentioned about Canada Goose, you still using the goose feathers for the inside of the coat. There was a lot of criticism from people. I've seen it online. Like, you know, Canada Goose goes fur free, but yeah, they still use feathers. And it's like, we're not gonna end all of these industries all at the same time. Everything takes time. Just because they stop using fur doesn't mean that activists are going to let up on them using the feathers, or companies that still use leather. No, we're going to continue that fight. It just takes a while. And I think it's unfair, and I think it's an injustice to criticize the activists who have been working so hard, because this doesn't happen over the span of a year, 5 years, or 10 years. This happens over the span of 20 years, sometimes decades. People have been fighting for fur to be a thing of the past. So I think it's a discredit to the activists that are involved in making this happen, that you criticize what's not being done.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of, most people, the average person on the street will see fur as abhorrent. The other ones will see it as a status symbol. They see it's something to aspire to, the way with the diamonds, you know, the thick makeup, the high heels, the Louis Vuitton bags. But the ones on the street who see it as abhorrent, they don't understand the kind of like the cruelty which goes with feathers and everything as well. They just see it as, I mean, these people are not necessarily vegan. I mean, they're not out to be vegan. They just see fur as something which is unnecessary. And they also probably think, you know, the goose feathers are from, you know, as a byproduct from other industries, you know, from the meat industry sort of thing. And you're right, it is about sort of recognizing that there has been this massive success through a massive load of hard work. And then thinking, okay, we've done that now. So the next step is you have to work on people to understand the cruelty within the, you know, the feather industry, where the down comes from. But yeah, I mean, it was still a massive achievement, I suppose. So one of the things, you know, lots of reasons why we started to do, you know, animal rights and things, it changed over the years. So how has your kind of, you know, have you started out being an activist? Has it changed in the time that you've kind of like your approach and your focus and things on as well?
Yes, definitely. I think it's a lot more strategic nowadays, just based on what I've seen and what I know. And in the early days of my activism, it was all about making your presence felt on the streets and doing outreach on the streets. When now we're starting to see a more politicized version of activism. We're starting to go to our council members. We're starting to go to our elected officials, our mayors, our governors, and writing petitions and trying to get bills passed to protect animals. So, I mean, I'm not saying that this just recently started, but it's gaining more and more momentum. We're seeing more organizations pop up that are advocating politically. And you still have street activism, outreach, disruptions, those are still necessary. They all go hand in hand because it causes an awareness to people that might not know that these things are going on. I mean, how many people walk in the streets that eat a hamburger know the backstory behind that hamburger? Most people are not going to go out of their way to watch a factory farm video just for the hell of it. But we need that awareness. People have to know what's going on behind the scenes to the things that they contribute to. And that's why the street activism is still necessary. That's why the outreach is still necessary. But I like that we are going into the political arena with our activism and starting to create laws to protect these animals. And I think that's where I've seen it go from being activists on the street, and we've seen different types of activism as far as like I said, the disruptions, people that may not understand why we're doing what we do, but now we're starting to see like a more clean and polished version of activism, and I like where it's going because I think that it's shown that it's proven to be successful as far as the political aspect is concerned.
I mean, you're right. We do it as a group. We do our activism in a number of ways. Partly it was enforced because of lockdown, because of obviously the pandemic, and we had to kind of like think of new ways to work. But we do, outreach. We do stalls in Newcastle, which is our biggest city in the area, every fortnight. And we also we do slaughterhouse vigils. We support other groups who do different things as well. But we also do quite a lot of our social media. So we do, which is obviously why we're trying to increase our social media presence, because we do quite a lot of different things. It's trying to get people hooked in to veganism and animal rights. So, it could be the food aspect, it could be the environment aspect, it could be the eggs, because people have hens or something. So we try a variety of ways, but more and more we're finding that we are, working with politicians and our local councils. We work with our local council quite a lot to do different things, environmental stuff, because we see it's linked to wildlife. And also, we've got, Anita Crank from the Animal Safe Movement in Canada. We're working with her for the plant-based treaty, because she's kind of doing it from the angle of, we're not going, if we keep on pushing veganism, there's a lot of people who don't like the word vegan and they will automatically turn off. But if you push it from the climate change point of view, you have all these people who are environmentalists, and we then say you can't be an environmentalist if you're not vegan, because obviously animal agriculture and commercial fishing are a big part of climate issues. So we work with her to do that as well as part of the plant-based treaty. And we've got a really good politician here, Emma Buck, who supports us quite a lot with the work we do. And again, it's kind of like trying to get things discussed in Parliament. In our parliaments and our local councils, to keep on changing, pushing the political agenda, because ultimately we want the laws to change. We want people who won't change, we need them to change sort of by changing the laws for them,
Right.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the negativity you get? Because obviously we get negativity. I've just been going through our teeny little YouTube channel and sort of answering all the negative comments. So how do you deal with your negative comments? Or do you?
I ignore it. I mean, I feel if it's not worth me answering, like if someone had a legitimate concern, then I would address it. But a lot of times it's negativity for the sake of people being negative, and I just ignore it. It's not worth my time and energy to involve myself in what they're trying to cultivate, because so much of that energy can be put into actual activism. And I'd rather focus on the activism. I'd rather focus on the people that want to hear this message and that need to hear this message, as opposed to somebody who just wants to be negative for the sake of being negative. So I don't engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've always had the sort of policy of, if somebody's being downright abusive, just block them. It's absolutely pointless. If somebody is kind of being, questioning what we're doing, we will try and have a conversation, but a very brief one. And if they don't engage after that, it's just kind of like, it's pointless going beyond it,
Right.
Yeah, because it's just a waste of breath.
I'm sorry?
It's just a waste of breath and time, isn't it?
It is. And I end up blocking a lot of people too, because it's just, again, it's not worth my time. Some people I will try to reach out to. Like I said, if you have a legitimate concern, and I feel like you're worth my time, then I will answer your question. But if I see that you're just arguing with me and disagreeing just to have a debate on I listen, you win.
Yeah.
You win. Like, you get the last word, you get the last comment. I'm not going to comment back, because it just becomes a big waste of time. Like, some people would push back and push back. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They just want to be negative. And maybe because it makes them feel good about the choices they make, and they do harm animals. So, you know, if it turns into a debate, you know what? You win. I don't want to fight. You know, I said what I had to say. Yeah. And, you know, we're done here.
It's a very, very good way to deal with them. We had one last night who was arguing using the religious route. You know, God said it's okay to eat animals, sort of thing. And we kind of, you know, you kind of go back, because we've got some really good reference leaflets with you know, passages and things where it kind of disproves the argument. Kind of, you go backwards and forwards, and you open up a discussion. But at the end of it, it just came back to, you know, what you're actually saying is you are defending animal abuse, and we cannot accept that, and we won't accept it. So, kind of end of discussion, really. You know, it's pointless. But
just because a scripture tells you can do something doesn't mean that you necessarily should do it. Because there are things in the scriptures that people overlook.
Yeah.
Because you know, so, like, don't use that one part of a scripture to justify abuse to animals, but everything else, you know, and you're committing adultery and everything else. You know, don't use the scripture to justify your negative behavior, basically.
Yeah. But that's how the conversation ended, because this gentleman was coming back with, you know, this chapter said this and this verse said the other. And we were like, yeah, but there's equal chapters which we can totally disprove what you were saying. And you're just going backwards and forwards. Ultimately, it's about you are defending animal abuse. So if you're prepared to defend animal abuse, that's end of conversation. You know, it's just wasting everybody's time. And he was never ever going to change his mind. You know, once you kind of get through, you know, a few comments, you know he's not really listening to what you're saying. You know.
Can I say something about that, please?
Yeah, sure.
When doing activism outreach, talking to your neighbors, your family, I think a lot of times vegans get frustrated because they cannot convince someone to go vegan. Yeah. And I would suggest that we not waste time. We would not waste time on these people. Like, talk to the people that want to hear you. I mean, sure, we want our relatives and our friends to go vegan, but we cannot force them. We have a message. Yeah. We can convey a message, but it's up to them whether they want to receive it or not. But I think that we should focus more on people that are willing to receive the message, as opposed to someone who is just being stubborn. Yeah. And I see it all the time. People get frustrated, like, my mother, she has diabetes, she has this, she has that, she has cancer. I'm trying to get her to switch over to a plant-based diet. She doesn't listen to me. It's like, I get that part of it, but if she's not willing to change, like, there are people out there that are willing to receive this message, and that's who we should focus on, the people that want to learn more about what it is we do and why we advocate for animals.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, you know, they do have to be willing to you know, willing and ready to receive the message. I know Joey Carbstrong said that, you know, he kind of, you don't know what part of their vegan journey they're at. It could be at the start of it, and they're not going to they're going to listen to a little bit of it and discard the rest of it. But actually, you could be the turning point. It could be they've listened to it a few times now, they've done their own research, and then they hear you at the very end. But if somebody's going to come along and not be, you know, they're just kind of coming for an argument, it's probably just that it's not the right time for them to just leave them to it and walk away. Yeah. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about Voters for Animal Rights, which you're working with now?
Voters for Animal Rights is a political advocacy group for animals. They've been very successful in passing a few bills this year, not this year, in the last few years. I like their work. I respect what they're doing. I respect Ali Feldman, who's the president and the founder of Voters for Animal Rights. I think that we are picking up a lot of momentum, that we have a lot of council members on our side that understand the plight of animals and want to do something about it. So there's definitely a lot of value in what Voters for Animal Rights is doing. And I think it's going to change the way we view animals and the way we treat animals. And moving forward, I think this is the way like the direction activism is going, political advocacy. Yeah. And Ali is definitely leading the charge on these issues. So, you know, kudos to her, kudos to VFAR. And I'm just glad to be a part of the organization that's doing amazing things.
I think the political route is quite a slow route, isn't it? But but that's the one which will stick, because it's going to essentially change laws. So I think there's an awful lot of, you know, it's really, really good that people are prepared to put the work in, you know, the legwork to actually do to go down this political route. Because I mean, for example, you could have one government in who was going to pursue a particular avenue, and then in 4 years, you know, kind of you're pushing it through, and legislation is just about to go in, and another government will come in and change it. You know, a bit like what you've had in obviously in the US, and what we've had sort of like a year and a half ago. So we've got to keep on pushing it and making sure that our message doesn't fall by the way when governments change.
Definitely. I see that, but you know, we have to keep in mind that government works for us. We don't work for them. They are there to do what we want them to do. And through Voters for Animal Rights, we're making these connections to politicians. We're holding them accountable. That's why VFAR has been successful in banning foie gras and other bills that we were able to pass that protect wildlife like birds. But I understand what you're saying, but it's up to the people to put pressure on their government and let them know where they stand on certain issues. And they have no choice but to submit to the will of the people. And I think that's something like I'm not a big advocate of government, but I see the value in what VFAR is doing, and it's given me a new outlook on voting and making a change politically and systemically. There is value in it, and I want people to understand that they have the power. You have voting power, you can use it, and you can change the dynamic of how animals are being treated. So there's definitely I understand what you're saying. Like every 4 years, like policies change. We have new representatives, and you know, it's a challenge. But just like everything else in life, you know, it's no different.
Yeah, you're right. So what's next for you then, in terms of what you're doing as an individual and the work you're doing with other groups as well?
I'm just gonna keep doing what I've been doing. You know, Voice for Change. I'm trying to really turn this into an effective form of activism. And my writing, I will continue with the writing, trying to reach kids. Actually, PETA has reached out to me in regards to my 2 children's books, and they're trying to spread the message with me, spread my message to other children. I mean, kids are getting this message through my writing, but they're trying to like broaden the you know, the message, so to speak, so that more children are getting this information, and hopefully more children are starting to understand what veganism is and what compassion for animals is all about. But other than that, I mean, whatever comes my way, you know, I'm an activist. At the end of the day, I show up when I'm needed. I show up when I feel like the cause needs attention. I work with many different groups here in New York, not directly, but I'm there to be present for the animals. I'm there to be present and in certain communities, especially when we do slaughterhouse vigils, to help people in these communities understand why these places need to be shut down. But whatever comes my way, I don't know, creatively, whatever comes to mind, and that's where I go. I go where the wind blows me.
Do you ever switch off?
Do I ever switch off? What do you mean as far as activism?
Yeah, no, do you ever get some like downtime where you actually kind of relax and do things for yourself, or is it always, I mean, I kind of thought I would do activism part-time, but it's just a 24/7 job, isn't it?
You know what? For me, it is, but it isn't.
Mhm.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a single father,
Yeah,
so I have to be present for my children.
yeah.
Um, I still work a 9 to 5,
Mhm.
and I still do activism. I think a lot of people believe that I'm constantly going as far as activism is concerned, and it looks that way.
Mhm.
And to some degree, I am. But I do have time for myself. I make time for my friends. I make time for my family. I make time for myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, the activism is definitely a priority. But for me to say that it's on 24/7, I'll be lying to you. It's not. It just looks that way.
Yeah, it
But
definitely does. When I'm looking through your social media, it looks like you just don't stop.
yeah, I am very active, but I don't think I'm as active as people think I am. Again, at the end of the day, I am a father. I am in all these other things outside of being an activist. So I have to give them equal attention as well.
Yeah. Well, that's all my questions for you today. So it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. And I know obviously it's quite early in the morning down there, so you've got a full day ahead of you. And we are kind of it's 10 to 3 here, so it's quite late for us. But thank you very much anyway. It's been really, really good to talk to you. And so I'd like to say, just sign off now by saying this is Anna Malia from Northeast Animal Rights, carrying out one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews with Stuart Mitchell, also known as Vigilante Vegan in New York City. So thank you very much, Stuart, and goodbye for now.
Thank you for having me. Take care.